Good morning, everybody. It's me, Robert Phoenix, and I'm here with the Astro Weather for today, 4/11, 411, calling information. Remember calling 411 when you were a kid? Sometimes when I was lonely, I just fucking call 411. This is truth. I would just get on the phone and I'd call 411 and I'd ask them a question that was easily answered, or a number that I could easily find. But sometimes I just wanted to hear the voice of a human. And that's how these things go. All right. Let's get right into it today, since we have had a few days off here looking at things. It seems like I take 2 days off and a lot winds up happening in the world. I have a great star of the day for you guys today, and it was a tough one, real tough one. I had to whittle it down to just one, and there was clearly more than one worthy candidate today, but we got a good one though. All right, let's see where we are. All right, as of that was 6 a.m. I got into this practice of doing things 2 hours earlier in California. You know what I need to do? I need to make it right. I need to make it right. I need to live up to my Virgo in agreement here. And I need to make the day, the time, and everything about this experience on the money. So let me do that. Give me 1 sec here. We're almost there. I guess I should just do this. I'm just going to do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. We've had some lovely weather out here. Speaking of just general weather, we've had some lovely weather out here in the hill country. We had some nice light rain yesterday, and it was ionically, I feel like I was in an ionic bath yesterday. The negative ions, and actually I could feel the well-being in my bones. Like I had all this energy and everything last night. It was really cool. We need more of that. We need more of that ionic loveliness. All right, here we go. In general, all right. Just think of a world we could just be bathed in negative ions all the time. Just think how happy people would be. They'd be happy. They'd be happy. They'd be energized. And instead, we're dealing with all this other atmospheric crud. All right, here we go. So as of 8 a.m. here on 4/11/23, we've got the moon at the final degrees of Sagittarius. That means, yes, boys and girls, it is conjunct the galactic center this morning. And are you recharging? Are you emotionally connecting with your purpose, as imperceptible as it might be? Let it guide you today as the moon winds down and we start to move into the balsamic phase. We still have a little bit of a ways to go. We've got 3 signs to go. So when we get to the moon, at this point, right, it's definitely on the wane. What are we talking about here? Like waning gibbous at this point. So this is where we start to tie up loose ends, right? We tie up loose ends at this phase of the moon, and there's still some energy left in the moon, but it's really not energy that you can build on or expand into, right? It's on the other side of its apex. So we're looking at what's happened over the last 72 hours. And in mutable Sagittarius, we get to make adjustments. We have a nice trine today with the moon right at the start of the day here. Of course, if you're in another part of the world, you're already much deeper into your day. If you're in Europe, you're going to be at least 7 to 8 hours deeper into your day. So there's still the energy. You're just going to have a much more active late afternoon, early evening with this moon Jupiter trine. So goodwill goes a long way at the start of the day. and investing in goodwill. I talked about this on Sunday night, that the whole idea is that you wanted to kind of build up a reservoir of goodwill and a reservoir of positive expression with your emotional state. And the moon in Sagittarius offers that, right? You want to expand your emotional territory. Now, we do have a moon Neptune square going on today. So early in the morning, as you're expanding into the emotional potential of the day, goodwill, faith, good cheer, Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius inside this trine, tends to be very, very positive and, again, very receptive. Now, the moon Neptune square, you might be a little delusional. There could be some rose-colored glasses here. Well, it's okay. I think it's okay as long as you're not signing a real estate contract and they're pulling the wool over your eyes, in which case you have to be much more circumspect and engage with that Mercury sextile to Mars, right? The other thing with this moon Neptune square, and this is what I think could be an interesting day to day, is that you might just be more willing to gloss over other people's faults. I mean, that's another byproduct of the moon Neptune square. You know, the phrase "what me worry" comes to mind. Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine. And another phrase from the song "No Brain, No Pain" by Hall & Oates. There's a line in the song called "Don't try to rise above it, it's better below." No brain, no pain. That's your moon Neptune square, right? You could be so engaged in a "what me worry" kind of attitude or mindset that you might just gloss over any kind of emotional turbulence, right? So let's say, for instance, the people in your immediate environment aren't being all that nice, that they may have a bit of an axe to grind. And with the moon Neptune square, it's like, so what? So what? I'm not going to get drawn in. The only challenge you have here is just make sure that you're not being played for a fool, right? Even so, I think that the energy of the day kind of might even override that, you know. So it's okay. It's okay. Give yourself permission to be a little sloppy emotionally today. It's okay. There's so much strength in the chart in general that the moon Neptune square, you know, it's in Sagittarius too. You know, what do we know about Sagittarius? Sagittarius has the uncanny ability to land on its feet. Sagittarius always seems to land upright if something goes down or something's wrong or they make a mistake. So that energy's in the air as well. You know, if you think you make an emotional mistake today, perhaps you were too open, perhaps you were too vulnerable, perhaps you were too forgiving, don't worry about it. It'll pay off. It'll pay off strangely. And the people that have the attachment to the moon Neptune square, the people that have the attachment of feeling embarrassed or ashamed, it's on them. It's not on you. Just remember that. We have Pluto still hanging out at zero Aquarius. Boy, we got a real rude awakening with Pluto and Aquarius, didn't we? It all started in Nashville at the Covenant School. To me, that event will always be associated with Pluto and the ingress into Aquarius at zero. And we have a bit of a square going on, right? And the square is Jupiter. Jupiter-Pluto squares aren't bad squares. Jupiter squares aren't bad squares. What they are is they're gambling squares. They're risk-taking squares. So this is a very interesting day as it relates to money. And this whole idea of money is going to become much more omnipresent in our lives. Like, we're going to have to deal with the stark reality of the dollar being trashed internationally, the transference of power to China. That's happening right now. We're watching China become the great nation, right? They're ready to displace the United States as being the leaders of a multipolar world. And as a result of that, the currency is going to be taken through the mud. So with the Jupiter-Pluto square, you might be looking at, what are you going to do with your money? It's a bit of a risk. Do you want to invest in a stable coin outside of the Fed Now model? Coins like Cardano or XLM, which are built really to do the same thing that Fed Now is supposed to do. Are you looking at those kinds of stable coins? Are you looking at gold? Are you looking at silver? The Jupiter square Pluto gets you to think about that, especially Jupiter and Aries. We're in the third decan. That's the Sagittarian decan, which is more about freedom and autonomy, and don't fence me in, right? So we're looking at our resources and asking ourselves, well, what happens if I do this? What happens if I invest in this area? Will it help keep me sovereign, or at the very least free for a period of time? So if you're into these kinds of discussions, this is a time where, as Jupiter moves closer to Taurus, which it will over the next few weeks, we're going to get more and more into that square. And Jupiter approaches Taurus. Jupiter in Taurus is exalted, and it is the money shot, right? It is the money shot. So today we have the sun just crossing over Chiron, and that was a big energy over the weekend. The Sun Chiron conjunction, and people dealing with their own sense of both vulnerability and outrage. It's one of those transits that combines both, right? Because Chiron brings our vulnerability, and we're getting lined up here for that true note to eventually move into Aries on the 25th of July. So we're in the octagon. We're on the holodeck with Aries right now. And we're getting a big dose of it, and we've been able to practice it a little bit, so that when the true node moves into place, it's like, okay, we got our Aries game on. It's amazing how many clients I've had over the past couple of weeks that are Aries, and I know people like to get readings around their birthdays, but it's just been I've had more Aries clients this last month than I've ever had, I think. And Aries is a sign where they don't often get readings. Right, it's a very, very self-sufficient sign. So when Aries is coming to the table and wants to get a reading, you know that there's something in the air. And again, Jupiter plays a role here, and so does Chiron, because the Aries character wants to expand. It wants to learn. It wants to get a much bigger picture of where they are. And Chiron, it brings that sense of vulnerability. Like, Aries have this. Sometimes they have this vibe where they're made of steel, like the man and woman of steel. Well, Chiron coming into play says, you know what, maybe I'm not made of steel. Maybe I need to strengthen, or I need to get some flexibility in areas of my life that I'm aware of, but can't really put my finger on it. So it's been an interesting time with Aries clients. All right, so we got the square to Pluto. These are the two big squares of the day. Everything else is like full speed ahead. We have a nice Venus, really interesting. We have a Venus sextile here with Neptune, right? Because Neptune is kind of at the end of Pisces, and Venus just moving into Gemini fresh. So we have a new ingress of one of the luminaries, and it is Venus in Gemini, which is very gossipy. Gemini has a reputation of being very gossipy. And we had an incredibly long stretch of Mars in Gemini. And I'm sure that there were things that were said and done during Mars in Gemini that were divisive and or aggressive and or polarizing. Well, here comes Venus now in the wake of a very long Mars transit. And we made war. Can we make peace? Right. This is the olive branch that Venus has to offer. And we have a nice Venus trine to Pluto today. And I think we can safely understand how the other person feels, or how the other person might be experiencing something, because that's really the kind of the tabula rasa Venus and Gemini, it partitions itself and it always has a sense of observing its own role in whatever transaction is taking place. And in this case, it's relational. And Venus and Gemini is a little tricky. It's one of those aspects in a chart where there can be some duplicity with Venus and Gemini. And I remember I had this relationship with this woman she was a Gemini and she had Venus. It was a long time ago. And she had that typical kind of Venus and Gemini expression. She was definitely a flirt, right? She was a flirt, but then she would kind of like to observe the effects of her flirtations. So one night we were at this club in San Francisco, and we're hanging out, and went to the bar to go get a beer, a couple of beers, whatever. It's a long time ago. I was in my 20s, and I can't find her, right? And I look around, and I see her out on the dance floor, and she's dancing with some dude. I'm like, okay, all right, well, we'll see where this goes. And then she sees me. And then she brings him back to me to hang out with me. Now all of a sudden she's like sidling up and cuddling up with me. And this dude is like, oh, what the fuck is going on here? I thought we were really starting something, right? And now he's got to deal with me and her connect. That is a Venus and Gemini move, right? So it's like looking at sort of how these things unfold and how people, play out their roles with Venus and Gemini. It's a very interesting Venus. Let's put it that way. It's very stimulating. And the thing that I like about Venus and Gemini is that it's really good for getting out and about. So I know it's only Tuesday night, but you've got this fresh Venus and Gemini energy. We got this nice Venus sextile to Neptune and a Venus trine to Pluto. Tuesday night's one of those nights where people just don't go out. Tonight might be a good night to do that. And enjoy company stimulation, especially locally, because Venus rules the local areas. In terms of sibling relationships, I think it's a really good time. And I talked about this earlier, I think on Sunday night, where this is the week where we can, if you've got some bridges that you want to rebuild with your siblings, Venus and Gemini offers that opportunity, especially a day like today. With the sextile and even the moon Neptune square, it's kind of like, let's not sweat the small stuff. I'll overlook the fact that you were an asshole and you told me not to show up at Thanksgiving dinner if I wasn't vaccinated. What's also interesting is, Biden basically ended COVID and we have Venus and Gemini. And you go back and you look at the early days of COVID. And where was the true node? It was in Gemini. It was at the other end of Gemini. It was at 29 degrees. We were coming out of the Cancerian true node. But it was in Gemini. And so now we have Venus and Gemini at the end. So at 29, we have the Omega point at 29, and then we have the Alpha point at 0 in Gemini. So it's fitting that we would have the end of that debacle with Venus and Gemini here. On 15 Minutes to Flame, which I'm going to give a pitch for, we're going to get into old Tiffany Dover, who seems to have resurfaced. Isn't it interesting? She's resurfacing when Venus ingresses into Gemini. What a fascinating topic of conversation. We're going to get into her at 9/11 amongst a number of other things. We have a Mars sextile to Mercury. Mercury's in Taurus, and it doesn't make rash decisions in Taurus. Mercury thinks things through in Taurus. What's the cost? What's the cost of this? What's the bottom line? What's the net? And once you think through things today, and you get a clear picture in your brain about the economic potential involved in any decision, with the Mars sextile, it is time to move on it. It is time to move on it. So if you need to make a purchase today, Moon Neptune square, do your best Do your best to make sure that you understand the details. If you need to make a purchase today, that moon Mars sextile is good. It's a good day to make, especially for your home. If you're looking for some home improvement energy, today is one of those days. If you need to hire somebody, I think today's a good day to hire them. Even with the moon Neptune square, I would roll the dice. I would definitely roll the dice. So don't hesitate to call. With the moon Neptune square, you could say to yourself, well, I could do this. I could do this job myself. And then you get into it and it's like, no, I can't do this job myself. That's another version of the moon Neptune square. It's like overly confident. And with the moon, we're dealing with domestic situations. So don't be afraid to call in an expert if you need somebody to execute on something around the home. And of course, we have the ongoing Mars Saturn trine. And I hope you're working on something that has long-term potential in your life, because this transit is absolutely fantastic for that. I would say this is a very good day. Later tonight, we're going to have the moon ingressing into Capricorn, and that brings us with a very, very different emotional landscape tomorrow. So today is enthusiastic, maybe a little overly enthusiastic, but go with it, right? Just roll with it and enjoy yourself. Get out a little bit. That Venus and Gemini certainly is social. And at that 0-degree trine, man, you could really, really rebuild some relationships with that Venus Pluto trine. And that's also getting into things like alternative currencies. We're looking at them, right? We're looking at them. We see Fed now sort of nipping at our heels, and people are asking themselves, well, what can I do? How can I stay in this game without being a slave of the beast system that's in the air? And today's one of those days where there's a lot of curiosity and a lot of mental energy being expended in that area. Okay, let's talk about our star of the day. It's a good one. And some of you might know who this person is, and other people may not be familiar with him, but he's incredibly important. Now, I could have chosen Anton LaVey today, the guy who was the famous Satanist. He's an interesting character for sure. I mean, the guy made a huge impact on culture. Huge. Whether you agree with Satanism or not, you don't have the 60s and the 70s without the backdrop of LaVey and Satanism and all that's going on there with that whole scene, especially coming out of San Francisco. You get Marilyn Monroe and you get Sammy Davis Jr. part of that clique. That said, our star of the day is, drum roll, please. I should have a drum roll effect for this. Russell Targ. You may ask yourself, who the fuck is Russell Targ? Russell Targ was one half of the Project Grill Flame engineers. He and Hal Puthoff were the guys that were pretty much responsible for the birth of remote viewing. So we have this whole idea of psychic super soldiers that are also connected to Russell Targ, men who stare at goats. That thing that all comes out of the project that they began at Stanford Research Institute and were eventually hired out by the United States Army. So let's look at this quote from Russell Targ. Although each of us obviously inhabits a separate physical body, the laboratory data from 100 years of parapsychology research strongly indicate that there is no separation in consciousness. So Russell Targ was really big on non-local states of consciousness, meaning that you could be anywhere in the universe if you wanted to be. And here we're really getting into the whole idea of like quark theory, right? Now, if you look at his chart, this is fascinating because he's in Aries, right? So we have Uranus in Aries and Mars in Aries and Sun in Aries. We have Pallas in Aries, pattern recognition, and he has all of them in the 12th house. And what was Project Grill Flame? Well, that was the project that essentially groomed a bunch of remote viewers, right? And what was the entity that was in charge of them. It was the Department of Defense and mostly the Army. And where do you do such things? Well, you don't do them in the 10th house for all the world to see. No, you do them in the 12th house, right? In the hidden recesses of some underground lab or base somewhere, wherever they were. I mean, they originally started off in Palo Alto, but I think they moved around. And even the intercepted house of Aries tells a story with Russell Targ. You know, it's like his 12th house is Piscean, and we're going to get into the 12th house with this moon Mercury conjunction, which is not, it's not a common conjunction. And people that have moon Mercury conjunctions are very intuitive. And I think Russell Targ, in as much as he was engaged in the facilitation and the operation of the project, well, Russ had some psychic ability too, right? With that Mercury moon conjunction. So it starts off here with this Mercury moon conjunction and an interest in psychic ability and intuition. And then it shifts and moves into the military application of the whole thing, right? And then it resolves itself with Taurus. And one of the things that he and Ingo Swann were very clear about and how put off was the protocols for remote viewing. And they were very strict about the protocols. And to me, that's very Taurus on the ascendant. You want to be able to see things in a way that were that are material, right? It materializes into form. And the whole idea with the remote viewers is that, you know, they would draw things. They would have a target. The target would be the longitude and latitude of something. And sometimes they were told that, or they were just given a target name minus the longitude and latitude. They were all given the same target, and they would go through these exercises where they would go into these states, right? I think was it delta wave states, right? If I'm not mistaken. And then they would go into the description of the thing that they were targeting, and of course they would draw it. And that's very Taurus rising in a lot of ways. Now, the other thing that's interesting about his chart is that he heads up a team, right? He and Hal Puthoff headed up a team of remote viewers, and it's the 11th house. And with Saturn in the 11th house, he is going to be one of the leaders of the team. And what I found interesting was that in 1972, when they started to do their first series of remote viewings, the true node was in Aquarius. Now, it was later in Aquarius, like it might have been around 4 degrees, but clearly one could make a case that the genesis and the idea of the project started when Russell Targ had his nodal return in the sign of Aquarius, and it really kickstarts everything in 1972. By 1976, Project Real Flame is up and running, and he is literally taking possession of the 12th house and leading people in these areas of psychic research and really being psychic warriors. You know, it's such a fascinating chart in that regard. And that's why I chose him. That's why I chose this chart. I think it's a really cool chart. And we have Chiron at 1 Gemini. So he can be both logical and rational. But on the other side of Russ Targ, he's also looking into the non-locality of consciousness. The thing that I found to be very interesting about him is that he was legally blind. You can see he's got these probably very large glasses here. He's legally blind, and yet he was a motorcycle enthusiast, right? So you had a legally blind guy. You can even kind of see it, right? Mars Sun conjunction. Once this guy gets going, really there's no stopping him. You know, so he's just gonna test the waters, right? He's gonna, you know, damn the torpedoes and take off, literally flying like the comic book character Daredevil. The other thing too is the Mars Uranus conjunction. Look at that. You know, Mars and Aries being very, very martial and very soldier-like, and Uranus being a different kind of soldier, right? We have the new age soldier with the Mars Uranus conjunction. Well, Russell Targ was one of the leaders and one of the quote unquote commanders of Project Girl Flame. Doesn't have a lot of Earth in his chart. Really had to lean on that ascendant, right, in order to get his grounding. He's got Neptune in Virgo. It's Earth, but it's very fluid Earth. It's not the most stable manifestation of Earth in the chart. So it's really Ceres and the ascendant is proven to me. Prove it to me. Let's see what we got. Let's see what the results bring us. The other thing too is Juno in the 9th house in Capricorn, which is an interesting placement for Juno in dealing with hierarchies, right? That's what he's going to wind up dealing with. People that were actually in the military, having rank, all that stuff with Juno. It's kind of a new experience for him. And one of the areas where he'd have to somehow really prove it, right? He'd have to really prove what's going on with his superiors, so-called superiors. Anyway, a very interesting character. And, we really don't have remote viewing to the degree that we do without Russell Targ, who's an Aries and a pioneer, and more than just a pioneer, he is the leader and the commander of Psychic Warriors. That's our star of the day, Russell Targ. If you're interested in getting some CBD to help you deal with the psychic interference and the psychic smog in your life, if you would like some CBD to make sure that you maintain your position in this world as a psychic warrior, one of the things that I would recommend is to give a little look-see into our friend Chris's site and his product, truehempscience.com, which is an absolute game changer. It's been a game changer and a lifesaver for me in a lot of ways. So let me give you a little visual for Chris and his site. And there we go. So we go right in here now and you get the ASMR ambient version of the cool, calm potentiality of introducing and integrating CBD into your life. So you can definitely get more information by speaking to an expert, and that expert is our friend Chris. So guess what? If you spend $100 or more, what do you get? You get free product. Just type in 15MINS. That's 15MINS. And what is 15MINS short for? Well, it's short for 15 minutes. And in a little over a half an hour, we have 15 minutes of flame, which is a show that I do over on my website where I'm able to say whatever the hell I want and not have to worry or deal with what happens on YouTube. So please join me and the great Chataria at 9:11 a.m. Central Standard Time, 10:41 a.m. to 10:41 Central Standard Time. And the cool thing about this is I also simulcast on Rumble. So if you're a Rumble person, I have a 15 minutes of flame page on Rumble. You can always go there and watch the show afterwards. And I create a podcast as well that gets put out on Apple and Spotify and iHeartRadio and the usual suspects. So there's many different ways that you can get into the content. We're gonna have a good show today, really good show today. It's the return of Tiffany Dover and more. We got a lot to cover today, so jump on board and please join us. All right. Thanks for being here. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to set what's possible. If you would like to purchase a reading and have a session with me, you can do that over on robertphoenix.com. I'll have a link here in the text. I can certainly do that and book a session with me. All right, take good care. Have a fantastic day. And of course,